שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו, אמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו, אמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Our family arrived in Israel for a holiday trip of a lifetime. It takes 14 hours to fly from San Francisco to Tel Aviv. We were enthusiastic as we walked down the airport ramp toward a welcome sign written in English and Hebrew. More of the distinctive Hebrew lettering was on the bus that we took to our hotel, directly across from the Mediterranean. It's called the Royal Beach. We had arrived in December, and there was a Christmas tree in the lobby of the hotel. Upstairs in our elegant room, we found a bottle of Israeli wine waiting for us. We checked out our facilities and then went to a sliding glass door that opened to a balcony and a wonderful view of the surf and beach below. In the opposite direction was the skyline of the very modern skyscrapers of Tel Aviv. In the morning, we again looked at the same views from Aaron and Jay's room. Passing through the entry to the restaurant, we came into the spacious, modern dining room. First of our morning desires was a cup of latte. The Royal Beach barista made us a foaming cup with good morning written atop the froth. A perfect beginning for our family adventures in Israel. A chef greeted us with a pan of scrambled eggs, and then we carried on down the length of an abundant buffet with an enormous selection of delicious food. After breakfast, we walked through the hotel bar to a conference room to meet our Israeli guide, Amit.
So, later on, what we are going to do, we are going to leave the hotel, we are going to take the bus to take a ride to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is actually quite a new city. We can talk about Tel Aviv only since 1909. Even though this is the financial hub, this is the economical center of Israel, this is the place for high-tech. Our Silicon Valley is located actually here, and this is the place that we can talk about the center of art.
We left the beach and were driven by bus to the main part of Tel Aviv, where we turned on to Rothschild Boulevard. This area contains some 4,000 buildings from the 1920s and 30s, whose white exteriors gave it the name White City. This area received a UNESCO World Heritage designation in 2003, mostly because of the Bauhaus-style buildings located here. Off the bus, we walked to Tel Aviv's very first skyscraper, built in the 1960s, and at the time the tallest building in the Middle East. Inside there was a great exhibit about the White City. There was a huge diorama showing Tel Aviv in 2004. Our hotel was not on the map as it was built in 2013, the newest hotel in town. There was also a photography exhibit with pictures showing the amazing rise of the city since its inception in 1909. rising from the barren desert to become an artistic, economic, and technological center of the Middle East. Europeans began arriving in even greater numbers after the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s. With them, they brought their talents and dreams to make Palestine a safe place for them to live and flourish. Emmett told us about the development of the city in what is now the thriving financial hub of Tel Aviv. Since the 1960s, the place has grown with multiple skyscrapers. This has meant the older areas are experiencing gentrification. The city has begun to enforce rules to save old structures so as to prevent completely wiping out some of the older character of the city from its beginning in 1909. We talked briefly with a local man who told us about the changes in the real estate in his area, and then returned to the bus as it had begun to rain. Our bus had difficulty when it came to a corner with an illegally parked car. Emmett and some locals combined forces to solve our problem.
The rain stopped just as we got off the bus at the Carmel market. We needed some shekels, local currency, before heading into the Shuk, or market. Our first stop was a health food store. Israel has the largest percentage of vegans per capita in the world, an estimated 5% of the population. An increasing number of products carry the stamp of vegan-friendly, the mark of the Israeli nonprofit that recognized the growth of the movement in 2012. I got some tips on vegan skincare products from a woman behind the counter and selected a few items. We then entered the Shuk to check out the offerings there. Begun in 1920, just 11 years after the establishment of the city, this is the largest authentic Middle Eastern-style Shuk in Tel Aviv. Tourists come to experience the old market, and locals come for supplies, fresh baked goods, and produce. We had arrived at a time when locals were out before Shabbat, the Sabbath, buying supplies for their family needs. Walking through the market, we enjoyed our family morning in Tel Aviv. We passed through a produce area and came to a hot food stand selling a local specialty, the bowika, a fried pita that is stuffed with various ingredients like meat, egg, and spices.
You can go all the way over here.
Yuda Kaisar, Burika im Basar.
I translated. Who is the emperor? The one that eats burika with meat. Everyone feel hunger. Please approach to my office.
Hello.
I like to see.
No, but I will first I wanted you to taste interesting stuff. And I cannot eat it because then, this is too much calories.
Two young men got bowikas. On their heads, small round yarmulkes worn for religious purposes by Jewish men. Emmett bought us all bowikas, and we stood in the shuk having our snack. Then we began to do some shopping. 40 shekels is 11 US dollars. 3 t-shirts for $28. Jay got a t-shirt and then bought a leather and silver bracelet from a different vendor. I noticed a large display of earrings, and I bought 2 pair of these beautiful earrings from a happy Israeli vendor. Mom contemplated buying some spices from the huge fragrant display as we walked on, passing all kinds of sweets. Pistachios were sprinkled on candies and rolled into colorful pastries. After looking over the selections of baklava, we decided to buy some of these beautiful baked goods. On through the market we went till we came to the end, and then walked back the 2 blocks to our hotel on the beach. Later that evening, we were taken further down the waterfront to a seafood restaurant called Benny the Fisherman. Our group was led to a long table, and out came a cold bottle of Israeli white wine. Our waiter brought out a large salad for each of us. This was followed by a platter of roast chicken, French fries, and meatballs. We were also delivered a big baked fish accompanied with roasted potatoes. All this was topped off with a yummy custard dessert. We left Benny's the Fisherman full and happy to get on the bus and return to our beachfront hotel.
There was sun on the Mediterranean in the morning. We saw a surfer walking down the beach. Out in the water, a scattering of people were waiting for just the right wave. After breakfast, we met our group in the lobby to go for our day's touring.
Now we are on our way to Jaffa. We are going to spend some time, we're going to walk around Jaffa. It will be approximately around 2 hours. We are going to walk in the old part of Jaffa. There we are going to find out why this place is so not only interesting, but also so important.
Jaffa is a natural harbor in the southern and oldest part of Tel Aviv. Its ancient port was home to Alexander the Great's army who were stationed here. The Hebrew Bible tells us it was the port of entry for materials to build the temple in Jerusalem. We could see our hotel down the coast. A short distance away, surfers were riding the waves. We could also see the old minaret near where Jaffa surrendered to Richard the Lionheart during the Crusades. Into the remnants of the old city, we entered the tiny streets of ancient Jaffa. Today, Jaffa is an artist colony, featuring old restored buildings, art galleries, shops, and sidewalk cafes. We passed under the workshop of a painter as we continued through this now gentrified area. In the 1930s, there were riots here as increasing numbers of Jews moved to Palestine and settled. During British control in the 1940s, tension between the Jewish and Muslim people continued. After the British left and the United Nations petitioned Palestine, this area became Israel. Today, we tourists wander around the area, taking pictures and enjoying the ambiance of the old stone buildings and cobbled lanes. Further on, we came to the port and lighthouse of Jaffa, where this area was established 4,000 years ago. Nearby is the house of Simon the Tanner, where Jesus' disciple Peter is said to have stayed during his establishment of the Christian faith. Beyond, in an open area, there's a statue of Napoleon. Aaron greeted him. During his Middle Eastern campaign, Bonaparte visited Jaffa, and many of the French wounded and sick soldiers were housed in a monastery here. He commissioned this painting to quell reports that he had ordered plague victims in Jaffa to be given fatal doses of opium during his retreat from this expedition. We continued through the lanes and artist area with its whimsical creations and came to the shop of the famous Israeli architect and sculptor Frank Meisler. His works include memorials, synagogues, and part of Heathrow Airport in London. His small imaginative pieces show his creative abilities. At the end of this area was a courtyard with a fabulous live orange tree suspended from chains. The Jaffa orange was first developed by Ottoman farmers here in the 1800s. The orange was the primary export of Jaffa. This work from Israeli artist Ron Morin is called the floating orange tree in honor of this fruit. After leaving the artist area, we went to another shuk. This time, it was the Jaffa Flea Market, where we encountered a busker.
Emmett showed us where we were to meet up after we went for some free time to shop in this old shuk. Vendors sold products of an amazing variety along the sidewalks. Weaving our way, we passed an array of treasure, junk, and daily basics. We saw everything from Judaica to Persian tiles, jewelry, and old jeans. Sellers waited for customers while playing cards or reading the paper, as we then walked into several long rows of stalls. It was a great cultural experience to see what items you can get here in Israel. Bargaining and haggling are the rule, often the most fun in the shuk. Jay wanted to get an outfit like the one he'd seen in the movie Lawrence of Arabia. He stepped into a booth. Looks pretty good. This one is cotton, not silk like the one in the movie, but being 6'2" like Peter O'Toole really helps. Our family loves meandering through places like this, never knowing what treasures might be found just down the street or inside a shop. it was time for a break. We saw a pedestrianized street filled with sidewalk cafes. So we found a table outside and then checked out the drinks menu. How about a local beer or wine? We toasted to our fabulous shopping day in Israel. We paid with our colorful shekels. 4 drinks came to $31 US. Off again for more shopping, now feeling relaxed and ready to greet whatever came along. At our appointed time and place, we met up with Amit and the group and headed down the street for lunch at a famous spot in Jaffa, Dr. Sheshuka.
So you take like the bread and you sip it like you sip hummus. This is the spices, and this is lentil, this is hummus, this is salads, and next to it you have semolina. And you take the semolina, you put the semolina in the middle, and then you pour on the semolina the soup with the vegetables, and then you eat it. And this is traditional Moroccan food. So I guess that if you've been in Morocco, you ate something very similar to it. And shakshuka is interpretation from Israel, originally from Turkey, but in Israel they made this interpretation that is with the tomato sauce.
We scraped up the last bits of shashuka and then departed the restaurant, its funky pots hanging above us. On the street, we passed men smoking their hookahs and walked back to the entry of Jaffa and its gigantic Christmas tree, where we had a picture taken. Evening came in Tel Aviv. We walked from our hotel, crossing the street to the beach. This was the Winter Solstice. We wanted to get a picture of sunset on the Mediterranean. This area is called Banana Beach, and it was an absolutely perfect evening. A soft breeze was blowing as we watched the gentle surf roll in.
Morning came, and we were going to leave Tel Aviv. Departing our room, we came to a table set up at the end of the hall. It had votive candles to light for Shabbat, or the Sabbath. So we decided to ride the special elevator that operates automatically and satisfies the law requiring observant Jews to abstain from operating electrical switches on Shabbat.
Starting our way to Caesarea and going out from Tel Aviv, leaving Tel Aviv and saying goodbye. That is one of the biggest ports in the world 2000 years ago. How it is possible? Because of King Herod. And what we are going to find out when we are going to visit Caesarea is how these men able to create the biggest port in the world from a sandy beach.
Caesarea is on the coast, 35 miles north of Tel Aviv. This area was called Judea 2,000 years ago. It was ruled by Herod the Great, a Judean client king of the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus. Herod built this city at the same time Jesus was born in Bethlehem, 81 miles away. Caesarea, named for Caesar Augustus, was a typical Roman city with its usual buildings. Built by Herod where there was no natural harbor, it was created out of imported stone and the Roman invention of concrete. Caesarea served as an important commercial harbor in antiquity, rivaling Cleopatra's harbor at Alexandria, Egypt. This painting shows the half-round theater and the red-roof promontory palace of King Herod. Herod's legacy has polarized opinion. He's known for his colossal building projects throughout Judea, including his expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, but also for a story spread at a later time that he once ordered all boy babies killed in Bethlehem. The story told was that he feared a rival king of the Jews among the babies. Caesarea has an enormous hippodrome or racetrack that held Roman-style contests, including chariot races, for the entertainment of its citizens. These ruins give some idea of the huge and important city that once stood here, with its intricate and colorful mosaic floors laid down in opulent Roman style. Today, fishermen use the remains of the harbor walls to cast their huge poles, hoping for some catch to come along. Further down the beach, Jay stopped to pick up some seashells as we walked through a gate away from the harbor. There sat a lid to a Roman-style sarcophagus. Aaron decided it was a great place for a selfie. An Islamic minaret rose above us as we walked toward the ruins of the medieval-era Crusaders' fortress. Caesarea was held by the famous Muslim Sultan Saladin. Richard the Lionheart took the city by staging a siege. He conquered Caesarea in 1191 and then exiled its Muslim inhabitants. Today, the Crusaders' Gate is evocative of the picturesque style of medieval fortresses with its beautiful Gothic arches. Passing outside, we walked over the substantial Crusader-era moat and went to our bus.
"60 miles north of Tel Aviv, up the coast, is the city of Haifa.
We are going to get to some part of the Baha'i Garden, not to really get inside the garden because we can't. But on that place I will take you and tell you the story of the Baha'i faith.
The governing organization of the worldwide Baha'i community is in Haifa. We went to the picturesque cascading Baha'i Gardens in Haifa.
You can see all of Haifa Bay, and this is a deep water bay. So just over there, below of us, this is the terrace. We have 19 terrace, that is a holy number in the world of the Baha'i faith. But over there you can see the Golden Dome.
The Golden Dome in the garden is the shrine of the Bab, founder of the religion. Known as the Hanging Gardens of Haifa, the immaculately maintained 19-garden terrace around the shrine are on Mount Carmel that overlook the beautiful blue harbor. Baha'i teaches that God is single and all-powerful. Its goal is of a unified world order that ensures the prosperity of all nations, races, creeds, and classes. Baha'i says that equality of the sexes is a spiritual and moral standard and is essential for unification of the planet and the unfoldment of peace. See that star? It marks the long cruise ship port. Behind it, our next accommodation is hiding. We looked at the terraces above us and decided to go up for a higher and more complete, magnificent view. Our next stop was a 3-story stone building that was the home of a 3-generation family. Some family waited out front. Inside, we met 2 of the generations, Rania, Ahab, and their 7-year-old son, Noor. They're a Muslim family. They had prepared a home-hosted meal and served us dishes including stuffed tortillas, potato soup, and a salad. We also had rice and vegetable casserole with beverages of water, orange juice, and Coke. Rania and Ahab said they were expecting a new baby soon. After lunch, we went into their parlor for some fruit. The large screen television hung on the wall playing sports. Ahab told us about his coffee business. His grandfather began to import beans. Now he and his brother, who live upstairs, export ground coffee that also contains cardamom. Four-year-old Jules came in and his father cared for him while Rania and Noor passed some fruit around the room. We enjoyed getting to know this lovely family, even if only briefly. We used their facilities before departing from this fun family lunch. Finally, we were taken to that long waterfront cruise port to board our ship, the Clio.
Shalom lo boy na boy, Hashem lo yishmori, Shav shokat shoymed, Hashem lo yivne bayis. Shalom lo boy na boy, Hashem lo yishmori, Shav shokat shoymed. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yonum velo yishon, shoymed Yisroel. Ine lo yonum velo yishon, lo yanum velo yishon, shoy be Yisroel. Hine lo yanum velo yishon, lo yanum velo yishon, shoy be Yisroel. Hine lo yanum velo yishon, lo yanum velo yishon, shoy be Yisroel. Hashem lo yivne bayis. Shalom lo boy na boy, Hashem lo yishmori, Shav shokat shoymed, Hashem lo yivne bayis. Shalom lo boy no boy, Hashem lo yishmorigim, Shalom shokat shoyme, Hashem lo yivne bayis, Shalom lo boy no boy.
Captain Tino. Thank you, Dario. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I wish you very warm welcome on board of Motorvessel Clio. And I would like to make a toast for a happy beginning of our journey. So cheers. Cheers.
Dawn came. We were still in port in Haifa, on board the Clio. At breakfast, we were greeted by Cliff, head of the waitstaff. The ship's buffet was filled with pastries, fruit, yogurt, and other usual American breakfast selections. You could have a freshly made omelet if you wanted one. After breakfast, Captain Tino greeted us individually as we left the ship. The Clio held 4 groups, so we had 4 tour leaders with 4 buses. On our bus, Aaron was excited. We were ready for more adventures.
It's today the day of the modern history. And tell you also something about ISIS that is also related to this place. But it is very nearby because you will see the border with Syria.
We drove east, away from the coast, and climbed in elevation to Mount Bentel. We went up to an area that's seen a great deal of warfare in Israel since its beginning in 1948. We went up to the Golan Heights. The Golan, at 4,000 feet, is a strategic place that rises above both Israel and Syria. The black star shows our destination in the UN buffer zone. The wind was strong up here on top of Mount Bentel. A United Nations Jeep sat in the parking lot. We decided to get a picture of the 4 of us on the Golan Heights. We walked further up the mountain and past metal sculptures made from the scrap from equipment destroyed in battle. I noticed an old tank that had been left in a gully at the bottom of a hill. Further on, there was a wooden building. It turned out to be the Golan Heights gift shop. This war-torn area has a gift shop. Beyond was a signpost showing the distance to nearby locations including Damascus and Baghdad. Further on was an observation area topped with metal silhouettes of soldiers and an elevated platform. Its pole read, "May peace prevail on earth."
Behind this road, that is the big road, this is still part of Israel. There is another road. You can see the road that there is like a car going down there, and you can see like a city down there. So this place is called Quneitra. So that part is actually what we call the Purple Line. And all of this part over there is Syria.
Golan was taken from Syria in 1967 during the Six-Day War. It has remained a strategic Israeli lookout. In 1973, it was the site of one of the largest tank battles in history, otherwise known as the Yom Kippur War. The Syrians attacked here with 1,500 tanks and 1,000 artillery pieces. But Israel knew it couldn't risk losing this mountain nor any of the Golan. Israeli tanks were reduced to 7 under extreme enemy fire. The Israelis managed to destroy about 600 Syrian tanks. The Syrians eventually retreated, but not without inflicting heavy casualties on Israel. These silhouettes give an impression of the battle that took place here in 1973. They sit atop a bunker that shows the scars of gunfire. There's an underground area of the bunker we walked in to experience its dark tunnels and war rooms. Inside the rooms, now empty of any furnishings, we paused at the map of the United Nations buffer zone. That blue area shows the Sea of Galilee. Beyond, we came into an observation room filled with rainwater. Its open slit gave a view out onto the plains of Syria.
I would like to take people that it is okay with them and they know they can climb to the rooftop of this place, because from there you literally can see Syria. Syrian deserted officer compound.
Down from Mount Bentel, we stopped outside a concrete building that previously held Syrian headquarters. Outside it didn't look too bad. Inside, it revealed the destruction of war here.
יש רגעים נגמרות לי המילים, רק הראש מלא תמונות, רעשים ודמיונות. רגעים נגמרים ההסברים, רק הלב עובד שעות לכסות את הדמעות. בדקי אותי ואת פצעי, קחי אותי אליו. אמא, אני רוצה בנפש פנימה, לחזור הביתה אל ביתי, כמו שהיה בילדותי. קורא לך אמא, אני רוצה בנפש פנימה, לחזור אליי ואל דמותי, שלא אצא מדעתי. יש רגעים לא יודע מה עושים, מול עיניים אדומות, מול גבהים ותאומות. רגעים שהכל נשבר בפנים, וכולם אומרים תפילות, ואני מלא קללות.
After that very moving experience, we drove to a nearby kibbutz, a collective community in Israel. The first kibbutz was established in 1909 by people who emigrated to Palestine. Traditionally based on agriculture, now these communities may have industrial or high-tech enterprises. Kibbutz are communes, governed by a committee. Members share the work, including caring for all children. Originally, each kibbutz member received an equal budget according to his or her needs, regardless of what job they held. They're now evolving, with only a few dozen kibbutz still functioning under the more traditional models.
So basically, first of all, we will go to it. Later on, kindly I will ask Slava to tell us something about the kibbutz. אני אתן לך גם את המיקרופון שישמעו אותך. אנחנו אדומים.
Okay, guys, you have a red tablecloth. Okay, you can put your stuff over there and come back take food, okay?
We were greeted by the manager, Slavo. We learned that this kibbutz was founded in 1978 and currently has 125 members and looking for more. One of their enterprises is providing meals and tours of their kibbutz to tourists. After an abundant buffet meal in the community dining hall, we went to the kibbutz food shop. It was similar in size to a small convenience store. Amit shared some of his favorite candy. Then we looked around at the various products. Glad that there were pictures on them, as we couldn't decipher the Hebrew lettering. We left the kibbutz and drove on, going south.
This is one of the most interesting places here. Why? You're going to find out soon. Remember that the weather here is much more warm than the one of the Golan Heights, because now we went down to minus 700 feet below sea level. So it is quite hot here. When you go out from the bus, you will feel it.
Capernaum is an ancient fishing village on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. The town is cited in all 4 of the Gospels of the Christian Bible. According to the book of Mark, Jesus stayed here. It also says Jesus taught in the synagogue at Capernaum. This site is now controlled by religious organizations, and there was a charge to enter. Inside the gates was a sculpture garden. One piece looked like a homeless man on a bench. The stigmata revealed who it represented. Tradition holds that Jesus' disciple Peter owned a house here. We went first to the synagogue where Jesus taught. According to Luke's Gospel, the Capernaum Synagogue was built by a Roman centurion. The current building is on the foundations of that synagogue. These walls were built around the year 500. It was rebuilt by Christians as a shrine for visiting pilgrims. Across from the synagogue are the foundations of the original village dated from biblical times. Excavation on the site began in 1905. Evidence revealed that by the year 50, one of the houses was singled out for public use. There's ancient graffiti on the walls that refers to Jesus as Lord and Christ. The excavators concluded that this house in the village was the venerated former house of the disciple Peter. In 1990, a modern church was elevated above the excavated remains of the ancient house. Peter was a Galilee fisherman when Jesus called him to be a fisher of men.
Is the church of the fish and loaf. They are actually the same complex. But when we talk about the ceremony of the mount, so where was it? On a specific place? We don't know.
The Gospel of Luke describes a sermon preached around the Sea of Galilee by Jesus. He preached his message in several locations, perhaps including here. It's now called the Sermon on the Mount because of a different location. A church has been built here celebrating his sermon. We left the Church of Fish and Loaves and walked toward the Sea of Galilee. Heart-shaped rocks rested in the pebbles. A group of people were lined up at the water's edge.
we now? We're approaching the border between Israel and Jordan. After we returned to our ship, it took us through the Suez Canal to Egypt and then to Jordan. So we're skipping ahead to where we drove back from Jordan into Israel. First, we came to this checkpoint where we picked up a guard who came onto our bus to confirm our paperwork. Then we proceeded to the Jordan-Israel border crossing over the Jordan River at the Allenby Bridge.
Now we are in Israel and everything is going to be just wonderful. Prepare yourself for we are going to visit the old city and we're going to talk about Jerusalem. And if I could try to phrase it on one sentence, I will call it the Holy City.
After changing buses at the border, we drove through a barren wasteland, the Judean desert of sand and scrub. The terrain made an amazing transformation as we approached Jerusalem. A camel greeted us, and then we passed a donkey as we came off the bus on top of the Mount of Olives. We had stopped to get this fabulous view of Jerusalem. The walls of the city of David surrounded the Temple Mount, with its gold dome of the rock as its centerpiece. In the ravine below the wall was the Garden of Gethsemane, with its terraces of olive trees. Directly below us was a huge 3,000-year-old Jewish cemetery. It was an absolute thrill to look down at these famous historical places we had heard so much about. We posed for a group picture, Jerusalem as our backdrop. We once again passed the camel as we proceeded to drive down from the Vista Point, watching the Garden of Gethsemane go by.
This is Gethsemane, and this is the place that we are going to visit. The bus is going to stop us just over here, so we can get down from the bus. We're going to spend here, I guess, something like half an hour.
We walked through the gates into the Garden of Gethsemane. The Christian Bible says this is the place Jesus was arrested the night before he was crucified. This is a small area that sits near a church of a much larger garden.
That is to see the circles inside the tree, but olive tree do not have this. So here we use carbon 14, so we can actually estimate the time that is around 900 years. But we found roots that are probably much more ancient. So there was here trees probably 2,000 years ago, but they've been burned by the Roman army, where the Roman army fought against the rebels. So this is the reason that those trees are only 900 years old.
We could see the Church of All Nations across the rest of the Garden of Gethsemane, and the huge cemetery and a line-up of tour buses. This cemetery on the Mount of Olives was begun when King Solomon ordered the building of the first Jewish temple in Jerusalem. Next, we drove close to the Dung Gate that pierces the city wall. In ancient times, garbage and ash from sacrifices were taken out through this gate, thus the name Dung Gate. In 1535, when Jerusalem was held by the Muslims, Sultan Suleiman I ordered the old, then ruined parts of the city wall rebuilt. This area are those 16th century walls. Then we stopped for lunch at the old Jerusalem railway station, now converted into a pizza cafe. We walked through a bar room and were seated in the large converted station house. The waitstaff brought us one of their special pizzas as well as 2 lattes that we had ordered. Emmett got dessert for us, ice cream and pastries filled with nuts and cinnamon. After eating, we walked a short distance to our Jerusalem hotel, the very modern and luxury Inbal. Through the lobby, we went up to our rooms. Our family had identical accommodations, both with marble bath facilities. Our rooms looked out over an enclosed open-air courtyard. We could see each other across the way.
Breakfast was in the Inbal dining room on the ground floor. A wonderful assortment of fruit, including all kinds of dates, was laid out. There were salads and fish dishes to tempt us. Then, once again, through the lobby we went. We walked a short way to the old city and through the Jaffa Gate. Even though we just had breakfast, we bought a pastry from a man with a yummy assortment on a pushcart. Always room for pastry. The 4 of us had come on our own to explore the old city. The Jaffa Gate has huge metal doors that lead into the UNESCO World Heritage Site. This, at one time, was the portal toward ancient Jaffa. More recently, it became famous when British General Edmund Allenby marched through in 1917 to take control of the city. The bridge between Jordan and Israel is named for him. It was fascinating to see the contrast of some of the people in the old area. A monk and a man in Arabic headscarf walked past police with machine guns. Our first destination this morning was to the Tower of David. It's now a museum and performance venue that's located near the Jaffa Gate. It's a former citadel and rests on earlier foundations, but most were built by King Herod around 37 BCE. Some newer parts date to a later time when Muslims began occupation. A poster showing General Allenby walking through the Jaffa Gate hung near the entrance. Following the destruction of Jerusalem by Romans in the year 70, some parts of the citadel were preserved. The site here then became a barracks for Roman troops. When the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as its religion in 381, monks occupied the citadel. This tower then acquired the name the Tower of David after the ancient Israeli hero who fought the giant Goliath. We could see the Muslim temple with its golden dome of the rock gleaming across from us as we climbed higher in the tower, going above the performance venue. Passing a statue of King David as a boy with the head of Goliath, we went around the outside. Then inside the museum we saw panels depicting ancient Judean as well as Roman periods of Israel's history. A drawing illustrated Jerusalem as it might have appeared before the city's destruction, when the original walls were still intact. Another showed a drawing of the tower with the Temple of Jerusalem beyond. There was one of just the Jewish temple. We passed through an area with statues of the Crusader period. After 450 years of Muslim rule, Christians conquered the city in 1099 and the First Crusade. After many battles, in 1192, Sultan Saladin and Richard the Lionheart signed a treaty returning Jerusalem to the Muslims. It held until 1917, when General Allenby marched through the Jaffa Gate and the British then took control.
We went down into the ancient city and its maze of winding lanes. There we jostled with the locals and tourists beneath Jewish prayer cloths. Muslim headscarves hung close by belly dancing costumes. Vendors haggled with shoppers as we wandered under a colorful variety of souvenirs. Further on, we came to the Christian quarter, where we passed Franciscan friars and walked over a plaque that told of the huge paving stones in the area, originally laid during the Roman occupation of Jerusalem. People had been shopping on these lanes for more than 2,000 years. Crowns of thorns hung outside a shop filled with Christian icons. We passed all kinds of shops, and then a small utility vehicle passed us going down the narrow lane. Meanwhile, back at the Jaffa Gate, we left Old Jerusalem and walked past a large group of soldiers with machine guns. And then we came to a modern shopping center with a busker singing Hotel California. Our final stop was the world-famous King David Hotel. Inside the lobby, on a long white tile, is a series of signatures of famous hotel guests who've stayed here over the years. There was everyone from rock musician Neil Young from 1995 to Barack Obama, who was here in 2008. The King David Hotel was once the British headquarters here. In 1946, right-wing Zionists blew up part of the hotel. Those Zionists used violence in pursuit of their goal of creating a Jewish nation. We'd just come for a drink in this magnificent hotel. Back at the Inn Ball, we went to the dining room and had our dinner before going off to our rooms for a good night's sleep.
And what I would like to say, first of all, about the city itself. So today, we are talking about, in total, all of the city is only 48 square miles. That's it. It's not such a big city, but it is actually one of the biggest city by the size of it in Israel. Remember, this is a small country, and we are talking about approximately 1 million residents in the city. We are talking about, if you ask, what is the percentage? So probably 60%, a little bit more are Jewish, and we are talking about 40% that are Muslim and Christian. From that 60%, more than 60% are Orthodox or religious.
On our final day in Israel, we once again walked through the Jaffa Gate. This time, we came with our group and we followed Amit. He led us back into the maze of Old Jerusalem. We passed some souvenirs and followed others as we walked towards our first destination. At a corner, Amit turned, and there we were at the Western Wall, one of the most revered of Jewish places. Through a narrow passageway, we came to an open staircase that led to the wall. That old stone wall beyond is part of a retaining wall built to hold the Jewish temple. In ancient times, the temple would have been visible just above. Our group gathered at the bottom of the stairs and looked around at the gathering before us. The courtyard of the western wall is connected by a long footbridge to the Golden Dome of the Rock. The reason this is such a revered and sacred place is because it's as near as one can get to the destroyed temple built by Solomon, King David's son. People stand at the wall to feel close to the location of the Jewish Holy of Holies. Van and I watched a man perform purification before praying on the men-only side of the plaza. Then we watched as a boy celebrating his bar mitzvah walked with a Torah inside a beautiful metal case. When a Jewish boy reaches age 13, he's regarded as ready to take part in public worship. Females aren't allowed on this side of the plaza, so some celebrating the bar mitzvah stood above and threw candy. next walked into an underground chamber close by the wall. Inside was a quieter area where men were praying in what looked like a library. The black hats and clothing revealed that many were Orthodox, the most traditional practitioners of the Jewish faith. Another boy stood near cases holding Torah. He carried a metal container, helped by men wearing prayer shawls with yarmulkes and a small square black box. This small square black box holds prayers and was attached to the head and arm with a long strap. The Torah commands these should be worn to serve as a sign and remembrance that God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt.
Jay and Van returned to the group. Then Mom and I went to the women's side of the Western Wall. Partitioning prayer at the Western Wall between men and women is a relatively modern phenomenon. All people had worshipped here until the creation of Israel in 1948. A separation barrier was afterwards erected by Orthodox Jewish rabbis. A group called Women of the Wall and others have gone to court over the barrier and the prohibition of women bringing Torah scrolls for worship at the wall. The dispute is ongoing. We walked into the women's area just beneath the bridge of the Temple Mount. Tradition teaches that this area is near the first temple, built about 3,000 years ago by King Solomon. That temple held the Ark of the Covenant and the Ten Commandments. This wall was built on those foundations by King Herod the Great in about the year 19. Prayers written on paper are stuck between these venerated stones. Rejoining our group, we then had a family photo taken after the very moving experience of being at the Western Wall.
We passed more armed soldiers and then police also heavily armed as we left the area. Security is important in Israel. There are ongoing hostilities from some Palestinians displaced when the area was partitioned by the UN during the creation of the country of Israel. We turned away out of the shopping lanes and walked outside next to the old wall. We came to the Zion Gate. During the 1948 Israel War of Independence, Jordanian forces laid siege to Old Jerusalem. This mezuzah is made from bullet casings collected after a shootout when Jewish militia assaulted the Zion Gate. Pockmarks apparent on the wall of the gate are from the gunfire. Further along, we came to a Syriac convent. This is said to be the location of the upper room. The upper room is the name given to the place where tradition tells us Jesus had his final meal with his disciples before being crucified. We walked through a sanctuary, first going down and then up to reach the room of the Last Supper. The original building was long ago destroyed. The current building dates from the Middle Ages. Muslim occupation turned this room into a mosque before it once again became what some say is the location of the very first Christian church.
This room, as you can see, the style is by the Crusader. And this style, as you can see, these specific arches. Remember, Roman arches are what we call Romansk, are round. And then later on, they change. They change because of the relationship with the Muslim. Think about Alhambra and other places that you have different kind of arches that is in the time of the Muslim. And then we are talking about a new kind of a concept that is to take those arches and make them higher and higher. Now take this idea, take it all the way to Europe, and then you can start to see around those new kind of churches that are the Gothic churches. So when you see places like Notre Dame in area of Paris, French, when you go to see all the other cathedrals, that was a new concept to make the person to compare himself as such a small, tiny creature comparing to God that is huge, enormous, and so high to the sky. And this style arrived from here.
The fact that the current upper room was once a mosque became more understandable when we climbed onto the roof and went through a gate to where we could look across Jerusalem. This time, we were a bit closer to the Temple Mount and the Golden Dome of the Rock. Can you see the western wall just below the Temple Mount? This internet photo gives a perspective of the Jewish Sacred Wall and the Islamic Golden Dome. According to the Hebrew Bible, it's here on Temple Mount where God commanded Abraham to offer his son as a sacrifice. As a result, the first Jewish temple was built on this hilltop. Ages later, Jerusalem became Muslim. In 690, after Muhammad's death, an Islamic temple was built here. Beneath the dome sits a massive rock. The Quran says Muhammad took a journey from this rock to heaven. Muhammad died in 632. A temple was built here. The current one replaced that one in 1022. The remembrance of Muhammad's journey is one of the most significant events in Islam. We couldn't go to the Dome of the Rock. We just stood on this roof to see it. In the far distance was the West Bank barrier. Israel considers it a security barricade against terrorism, while Palestinians call it a racial segregation or apartheid wall. Down from the rooftop, We passed pipes and wires installed outside of these ancient buildings as we descended once more to street level. It was now afternoon and past our lunchtime. We walked toward a rooftop restaurant. This place catered to tourists, and we joined the crowd for an assortment of buffet dishes that appeal to visitors.
After lunch, we went back into the winding lanes, going toward our final destination for the trip. The dark round disc marks a station of the cross. We had come to the Via Dolorosa, believed to be the path that Jesus went on the way to his crucifixion. Stations 3 and 4 are next to each other, where there are now churches. Further down, we came to Station 5. As we got to this corner, the area became more crowded with people. Just then, we heard the sound of the Islamic call to prayer. Amit led us off the Via Dolorosa to an adjacent way that had many fewer people on it. Then the church bells began as we walked toward Station 9. Tradition says Jesus fell here under the weight of his crucifixion cross. This archway rose above us as we went toward the source of the bells, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The last places of the Passion of Jesus now sit within this ancient church. It's controlled by several different Christian sects. This church was built, destroyed, and has been rebuilt through the ages. Shortly after Roman Emperor Constantine issued his edict, making Rome Christian, a small church was built here. This large one encloses the small one, said to contain Jesus' tomb.
A couple of months ago, so this is the reason you can see the concrete ground. And again, you should ask the question.
Votive candles burned in a sand-filled container. The walls were covered with faded paintings. We went past a priest and continued through the chapel via a disintegrating wooden door. We came into the courtyard of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There's one station of the cross in the courtyard. That's where Jesus is said to have been stripped of his clothing. Garments hung above to signify that it occurred near this now sacred church.
This is for Orthodox, Catholic, Armenian, Coptic, so many different groups that have the faith with Christ. This church is the most important church in the world.
A group carried a small cross through the courtyard in the direction of the giant entry doors of the church. As they paused, we continued toward the entry. In the foyer is a rectangular structure where several devotional lights hung. Below it is the traditional location of the place Jesus was anointed after being crucified. This sacred stone is one place believers feel they can touch Jesus' passion. Above the anointing stone is a mosaic that shows the events that are believed to have occurred in areas that are now inside the church. Calvary, where the crucifixion took place, the anointment of Jesus after death, showing his mother and Mary Magdalene beside him, and the tomb where Jesus was buried. The tomb is now enclosed in the small ancient church further inside. We left the foyer and went into a tiny devotional room.
Go up to the station that we don't know where to the place for Christ to die on the cross and to see the emotional reaction of people. And you can go over there to see the tomb itself. It is located over there, and the anointment stone, when you can see people bring their scarf and put it over there to absorb the energy, because people do believe this is the place for Christ to be crucified and then resurrected.
Shalom Dimramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, Imru, Amen. Yaseh Shalom Dimramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru, Imru, Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom